In the quiet town of Millville, a mother walks 30 miles a day just to make ends meet, until one stranger's curiosity sparks a life-changing journey. What happens next? You won't believe it. In the sleepy town of Millville, nestled just outside the busy city, Sarah, a dedicated mother, rose before the crack of dawn every day. The soft hum of the alarm clock broke through the silence of her small, worn-down apartment. At 3:30 a.m., she silenced the persistent beeping and swung her legs over the edge of the bed. Her feet met the cold hardwood floor, sending a shiver up her spine. Her children, Ethan and Lily, were still fast asleep in the small room next door, oblivious to the long day ahead. Sarah quickly prepared a meager breakfast, just toast and instant coffee, trying not to wake her kids. As she ate, her gaze drifted toward the window, where the first traces of morning light barely kissed the horizon. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. By 4 a.m., Sarah was pulling on her old, patched-up sneakers and stepping out into the frigid morning air. The chill stung her skin, but she barely noticed. The sun hadn't yet risen, and the streets were empty, save for a few stray dogs and the occasional streetlight flickering on the quiet roads. With a deep breath, Sarah set off on her long walk, 15 miles to her job as a janitor at Millville Memorial Hospital. It was a grueling routine, one that most people would have never considered, but Sarah had no other choice. Her car, once a reliable companion, now sat idle in the driveway, broken beyond repair, an unwelcome reminder of how far she'd fallen. The few dollars she earned each week were barely enough to cover rent and food, let alone the high cost of getting her car fixed. So she walked, every day, without complaint. As she trudged along the empty streets, Sarah thought about her children, Ethan and Lily. They were young, Ethan just 10 and Lily only 6, but they were wise beyond their years. They never asked for new clothes, never complained about their old toys. They were just grateful for her love, and for that, Sarah knew she had to keep going. For them, she whispered to herself, her breath visible in the cool air. Every step is for them. Officer Jack Daniels had never noticed Sarah's daily trek before, not until one cool autumn morning, when something about her routine caught his attention. As he sat in his patrol car, sipping lukewarm coffee, he spotted her again, a small, determined figure walking briskly along the empty streets of Millville. He had seen her many times before, but today, something about her seemed different. She was walking with purpose, the weight of the world on her shoulders, yet her steps never faltered. He couldn't shake the thought that there was more to her than met the eye. For days, he watched from a distance, his curiosity growing with each passing morning. It wasn't just the sheer distance she walked, about 15 miles each way, that intrigued him, but the way she carried herself, head held high despite the obvious weariness in her gait. Most people would have given up long ago, but not Sarah. She pressed on, with the soft morning light slowly illuminating her worn-out sneakers and the deep lines of exhaustion that marred her face. One morning, Jack decided to follow her, keeping a respectful distance. As she walked through Millville's quiet streets, he couldn't help but notice how familiar the area was. Half-empty houses, cracked sidewalks, and the occasional resident hurrying to start their day. But Sarah's route led her far beyond the familiar sights of the neighborhood, deeper into the outskirts of town, where the roads became more desolate. She passed by old shops, long-forgotten buildings, and streets where not a single car had been seen in hours. Jack followed, all the while wrestling with a mix of admiration and concern. He knew this woman had a story, a reason for walking so relentlessly, for pushing herself through bitterness of the morning cold. There was a strength in her, quiet and unwavering, but also a sadness. The thought gnawed at him. What could possibly drive a mother to walk such a long distance every single day? He had to know. He had to understand. Jack's curiosity finally got the best of him one rainy morning. He had spent weeks following Sarah from a distance, but today, something inside him told him it was time to approach her. He parked his car near the corner of Pine Street, just as Sarah was approaching the familiar stretch of road that led out of the small town of Millville. The rain poured down in sheets, and Sarah, seemingly undeterred by the downpour, pressed on, her jacket soaked through. The weather was miserable, but she walked as if the storm didn't even exist. Jack couldn't help but admire her determination as he rolled down his window and called out, "Hey there, you're walking in this mess." Sarah slowed her pace but didn't stop. She gave a half smile, her hair matted to her face, and said, "I've got no choice, officer. The rain's not going to stop me." Jack leaned out a little, tried to make himself heard above the sound of the rain. "I've been seeing you walking this route for a while now. That's got to be a good 15, 20 miles round trip. You're one tough woman." Sarah's eyes briefly met his, and she shrugged. "What choice do I have? I don't ask for handouts. I walk because I have to." Jack was puzzled. He couldn't fathom why anyone would choose to walk such a grueling distance each day, especially in weather like this. There was no doubt that Sarah was tough. He'd seen that. But there was more to this than just stubbornness. He needed to know what it was. As he watched her walk away, her figure becoming a blurry shadow in the rain, a realization struck him. She wasn't just walking to get to work. She was walking because it was the only way. Something had happened to her car. He was sure of it, and he was determined to find out how he could help. But he knew one thing for certain. This woman, Sarah, had a story that was about more than just surviving. It was about never giving up, no matter how hard life got. The next day, Jack couldn't shake the image of Sarah walking through the rain. The more he thought about it, the more it bothered him. He knew Millville like the back of his hand, and he was well aware that the bus schedule didn't start early enough to help anyone with a 5 a.m. shift. But why hadn't Sarah asked for help? Why didn't she look for a ride, or even consider taking the bus, if she could find the time for it? It didn't make sense. So Jack did something that felt a little out of character for him. He pulled up to Millville Memorial Hospital the next morning, just before Sarah's shift was over. He parked on the street and leaned back in his seat, watching the entrance. He was hoping to catch a glimpse of her and maybe ask a few more questions. Sure enough, Sarah emerged right on schedule, her worn sneakers slapping against the wet pavement. She paused briefly to check her phone, probably a quick message from her kids, and then began her trek home. Jack watched her for a moment, debating whether to follow her again. But this time he had a plan. He grabbed his coffee and made a snap decision. He pulled his car around to match her pace, keeping just enough distance so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed or cornered. He rolled his window down and shouted, "Hey, Sarah, I was thinking about what you said yesterday. You really don't take any help from anyone, huh?" She turned her head, a little startled, but then gave him a small smile. "No need, officer. I've got it covered." Jack slowed his car to match her pace, a wry smile playing on his lips. "What about your car? You've been walking for months now. Can't be easy." She didn't stop walking, but her smile faded just a little. "Car broke down a while ago. Can't afford to fix it. Public transport doesn't run early enough." Jack felt a tug in his chest. There it was, the reason behind it all. She wasn't walking because she wanted to. She was walking because she had no other choice. He watched her for a moment longer, then made a mental note. This wasn't just about offering a ride. It was about doing something bigger. He wasn't sure what yet, but something inside him told him that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story. Jack spent the next few days thinking about Sarah's story. The image of her walking for miles in the early morning fog, her head held high despite the exhaustion in her eyes, stuck with him. He knew he had to do something, but what? Offering a ride seemed like the obvious choice, but it felt like a temporary fix. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like Sarah's struggles were a symptom of a larger issue. There had to be more to her story, more to what was driving her to endure this hardship day in and day out. One afternoon, Jack decided to swing by the local diner, where he often grabbed lunch. As luck would have it, Sarah was there, sitting alone in the corner booth, a sandwich in front of her. Her tired eyes scanned a small piece of paper, likely a grocery list for the week. She looked up when Jack walked in, a faint, polite smile crossing her face. "Hey, Sarah," he greeted, taking a seat across from her. "Mind if I join you for a bit?" She raised an eyebrow, her expression guarded. "Sure, officer, but I'm just eating a quick lunch." "Wouldn't dream of keeping you," Jack replied, leaning back in the booth. He gave her a moment, then added, "You know, I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about walking everywhere because your car's broken. That's rough. Sarah's smile flickered. She didn't say anything for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her sandwich. Then she finally spoke, her voice quieter this time. It's just the way it is, you know? My car broke down a while ago, and there's no money to fix it. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I can't afford to fall behind. Jack leaned forward, watching her closely. You don't have to do this alone, Sarah. People here care more than you think. And I think we can help. She looked at him, eyes narrowing slightly. What do you mean? Jack grinned. You'll see. Just trust me on this one. It was the first time Sarah had looked at him without the weight of exhaustion clouding her eyes. He had a feeling this conversation was the start of something that would change her life, and maybe the town's too. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity in Millville. Word about Sarah's daily walk and her unyielding determination to support her kids spread quickly. Jack, with his quiet determination, had been talking to local businesses, gathering donations, and organizing a plan to help Sarah. He wasn't sure what it would look like just yet, but he knew the community could come together for her. It wasn't charity, it was solidarity. They didn't want her to be embarrassed. They wanted her to feel like she belonged, like she wasn't in this alone. One afternoon, Jack found himself sitting at the diner again, this time with Mike, the local mechanic. Mike had heard about Sarah's situation and, to Jack's surprise, didn't hesitate when asked about helping her out. He scratched his beard thoughtfully, pushing his coffee cup aside. I'll be honest with you, Jack, Mike said, his thick hands curling around his mug. I've seen Sarah around here for months, walking like a soldier. But it's not right. No one should have to walk that far in the cold or the rain just to get to the job. Jack leaned forward, a plan forming in his mind. What if we could fix her car? Not just for a day or two, but make sure she can rely on it long term. Can you help? Mike grinned, the corners of his eyes crinkling. I thought you'd never ask. I've got some spare parts lying around, enough to get her back on the road, at least for a while. It's the least I can do. Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't just about fixing Sarah's car. It was about giving her the freedom to stop walking, to be able to rest after work instead of battling the world with every step. But Mike's generosity was just the beginning. Over the next few days, more people from the community offered to chip in. A local seamstress volunteered to repair Sarah's worn-out clothes, and a retired teacher even offered to tutor Sarah's kids, Ethan and Lily. It was a beautiful thing, watching the pieces fall into place, knowing they were all working together for someone who had never asked for anything. Jack could see the change in Sarah already. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was starting to believe that she could thrive. And all it took was one person to ask, what can we do to help? The morning that Sarah's car was finally ready, Jack couldn't help but feel like he was witnessing a small miracle. The entire community had come together to make it happen, from Mike, the mechanic who worked tirelessly with spare parts, to the small group of people who chipped in for the costs. But the most moving part was seeing Sarah's face when she walked up to the auto shop, her eyes wide with disbelief. Are you sure this is mine? Sarah asked, her voice a mixture of shock and disbelief, as she stood in front of her car, which now gleamed in the early morning sun. The mechanic, Mike, grinned from ear to ear. That's all yours, Sarah. We made sure everything's in tip-top shape, he said, handed her the keys with a wink. It's ready to roll. Sarah stood there, frozen for a moment. She hadn't been expecting this. No one had told her about the car repair, at least not until now. And yet, here it was, like a dream coming true. She reached her keys, her hands trembling slightly. This can't be real, Sarah muttered. Her mind raced. All those months of walking, of struggling to make ends meet. And now, a part of her was afraid to believe it. But when she turned the key in the ignition and the engine purred to life, something inside her shifted. She could breathe again. As Jack stood there, watching the moment unfold, a quiet pride filled his chest. The people of Millville had done more than just fix a car. They had fixed something much deeper. Sarah's sense of hope. She was no longer trapped in her routine, shackled by her own pride and determination. She could take the bus if she needed, or better yet, drive to work without wondering if she would make it in time. And that was priceless. I don't know how to thank you, Jack. This means everything, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. You don't have to thank me, Sarah, Jack replied with a smile. It's not me you should thank. It's all the folks here in Millville who came together for you. With that, Sarah slid into her car, and as she drove away, her heart lighter than it had been in months, Jack realized something. Sometimes, all it took was one spark of kindness to set off a fire that could warm an entire community. And Millville, it seemed, was starting to feel like home again for all the right reasons. A few weeks after Sarah's car was fixed, something unexpected began to happen in Millville. The quiet, sleepy town, known for its sleepy streets and small-town charm, suddenly felt a little more alive. People were smiling more, and they weren't just greeting each other with simple good morning. There was a sense of unity that hadn't existed before, and a lot of it had to do with Sarah. She had gone from being a woman who struggled silently to someone who now took the time to give back. At first, it started small. She'd help Mrs. Peterson down the street with her groceries, or she watched someone's kids while they ran errands. But it didn't take long before Sarah became a pillar of the community, and that small, stubborn woman who had walked miles each day was now inspiring everyone around her. One afternoon, Jack pulled into the local community center, hoping to catch up with Sarah. As he stepped out of his car, he noticed a sign that had just been put up, free after-school program for kids, sponsored by Sarah's neighborhood fund. The words made him pause, and a grin spread across his face. He hadn't expected this. Inside, Sarah was talking to a group of parents, organizing volunteers to help with the after-school tutoring sessions. There she was, no longer just a woman who walked for miles, but a leader, helping kids in need, offering the kind of support that she herself had always wished she had growing up. Her kids, Ethan and Lily, were running around in the back, laughing and helping set up games. "Jack!" Sarah called out, waving him over. "Come meet the crew." He approached, shaking his head in disbelief. "I never imagined it, Sarah. You've turned this whole place upside down." She smiled, her eyes bright. "It's not me, Jack. It's all of us. I just got the ball rolling. The community's the one making it happen." As he watched the parents, teachers, and kids come together to start a new chapter in their small town, Jack realized something. Sarah had become a catalyst, not just for change in her own life, but for everyone in Millville. And he couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of pride that he had been part of her journey. A journey that started with one small act of kindness and now had blossomed into something much bigger than any of them could have imagined. Months passed since Sarah had gotten her car back, and the small town of Millville had transformed. What started as a simple act of kindness, fixing a car, had blossomed into a ripple effect, with more and more residents coming together to help one another. But for Sarah, the journey wasn't just about receiving help. It was about realizing that her struggle wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was part of her story, and by opening up to others, she had sparked a movement in the town that made them all feel connected. One afternoon, as Sarah stood outside the community center, handing out flyers for the upcoming summer camp, a familiar voice called out from behind her, "Sarah, you busy?" She turned around and saw Jack walking toward her, his hands in his pockets, a warm smile on his face. "No, not at all," Sarah said, grinning. "Just getting the word out for the kids." "Yeah, I heard about that," Jack replied, shaking his head in disbelief. "You've really turned things around, haven't you?" Sarah paused for a moment, looking out at the children running around the playground, laughing and playing together. She thought about how far she had come, how far they had all come. "I didn't do it alone," Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. "This town, we all did it together. When I was walking those miles every day, I didn't think anyone cared. But now, I see it. People want to help. They want to be there for each other. I just had to ask." Jack smiled, but there was something deeper in his eyes. "You didn't just ask, Sarah. You showed people what it means to truly care. You turned your pain into purpose, and that's what inspired everyone here." Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. She'd learned something important during this journey. The hardest part wasn't the walk. It was allowing herself to be seen, to trust others enough to lean on them. And through that trust, She had not only changed her life, but also helped to change the lives of everyone in Millville. As she looked around at the smiling faces, Sarah knew that the most important lesson wasn't about fixing a car or offering help. It was about community. In the end, it was always about lifting each other up. And now, Millville was a place where that was happening every single day. It was a crisp, bright morning when Sarah stood outside her home in Millville, watching her children, Ethan and Lily, race around the yard, their laughter echoing through the quiet street. It had been several months since the day her car had been fixed, and the change in her life and in the town was undeniable. Her heart felt light as she watched Ethan attempt a cartwheel, and Lily cheer him on, clapping her little hands. These were the moments that made everything worth it. Jack had been right. It wasn't just about fixing a car or getting by. It was about building something bigger. She learned to ask for help, to trust in others, and to allow herself to be vulnerable. It hadn't been easy, but now, every time she looked around at the community that had rallied around her, she was reminded of something important. She wasn't alone. No one ever was. If they just reached out, the after-school program that she had helped get started was thriving, and the summer camp was set to kick off in a few weeks. Kids who might have otherwise been left to their own devices during the summer were now looking forward to activities and a safe place to be. And Sarah? She was no longer the quiet woman walking alone, quietly struggling. She was the woman who had learned to lead by example. One evening, Jack stopped by, a little later than usual. "Sarah, I was just thinking," he began, hesitating for a moment as he leaned against the fence. "You've done something special here. You've turned your story into something that'll last long after we're gone." Sarah smiled softly, looking at the sunset that bathed the town in golden light. "We all did it, Jack. I may have been the one to start it, but this town, this community, has shown me what true strength is. We can lift each other up. We always could." And just like that, Sarah knew she had found a real gift in all of this. It wasn't just about surviving or even thriving. It was about the connections we make with others, the way we rise together. The true power, she realized, was in the people who came together to help, the community that saw each other's needs, and the strength that came from knowing no one was ever truly alone.